to introduce our two amazing speakers today that are with us. So I'll just read a bit of their incredible bios. So Darren Lee, first of all, former elite cyclist, internationally renowned as a specialist in cycle-based power concept training for athletes from all sports, working as a consultant to top cycle studios and strength and conditioning coaches all over Europe. Some fun facts: Darren and his 20-year-old son are huge fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, same as me. He loves red wine, Kahilo coffee, and happens to be the creator of the cycling app Cyclozone.
Hi, guys.
Some of you may have used it already. And with him today, we've got Mel Thomas, the legend. Mel, he had a successful career in competitive boxing and American football. He competed nationally and internationally for more than 30 years. Mel's a highly sought after fitness instructor and personal trainer and a regular presenter at Club La Santa as part of the Bodyworks Week of Fitness. Mel's also a huge fan of Marvel movies and the 1990 Chicago Bulls. You can't go wrong with that. And he's also an instructor on Cyclozone, so you may have seen him on that as well. So yeah, thank you both so much for doing this, for offering your time and obviously expertise. So so let's get started. What do you guys think about the new Captain America? No. I'm kidding.
Don't get me started. Which one?
We thought maybe we want to start about maybe briefly talk about bike setup and the importance of bike setup, as it obviously might have a direct impact on our efficiency and maybe even injury prevention. So I was wondering, is there a general recommended setup for indoor bikes? Is it different from a road bike? And is there anything unique with the Keiser bike if a lot of us are using a Keiser bike?
Yeah, first of all, hello to everybody. Thanks for joining us today. First of all, I want to say what a great group this is, the Keiser M3R users group. I've kind of watched it for quite a long time, watched it grow. So it's an amazing group, a lot of common sense, a lot of good things spoken on here. So that's brilliant. And as we move after this lockdown, there's loads of questions. I mean, I've been fielding questions now for the last 12 to 14 months solidly, where people have just been direct messaging me on every format, every platform. And one of the biggest questions they ask is, do I set my bike up correctly? Now, bike setup in the world of cycling is absolutely critical. It's one of the first stops when you purchase a new bike, because your bike setup is directly relatable to how proficient you're going to be for riding that bike and obviously achieving what you want to achieve. On indoor cycling, it's slightly different. We don't have the ability to specialist fit a bike for everybody. Not everybody can afford to go to a specialist bike fitter and get that done. However, all indoor cycles have the adjustable areas of the bike that are necessary to we judge within around about a 7% perfect fit on most indoor cycle bikes. And the general rule of thumb is the same for all indoor cycle bikes. The general rule of thumb is it's generally because we're all generally proportioned very, very similarly. Okay, the height from our our collarbone to our hip, our collarbone to the end of our arms, and our hip bone down to our ankles generally are in proportion. There's a variance there, but not much. And most indoor cycle bikes are created around that kind of philosophy. They have an adjustment, which means you can adjust and minor adjust to bikes. The first stop always on all bikes is the seat height. The seat height is the kind of, I don't know if you agree, Mel, is what most people get wrong. I would say probably when I first came back from racing in Spain and I first got back into the indoor cycle world, I would say that 70% of all the people I was teaching in the classes set their saddles too low, which is kind of, it's something that's very easily corrected. But by having your saddle too low really isn't very good for riding a bike and can cause a number of issues. So first of all, saddle height is actually, as you stand next to the bike with your feet flat on the floor, is actually your hip bone height, okay? Not the top of your hip, because that's obviously the top of the pelvic bone. It's actually the pointed kind of profusion at the front of the pelvic bone itself. If you take your hand horizontally out from that point, stand next to the bike, and raise the saddle up till it's touching that hand, then generally you will have the correct height for your saddle. So, for example, on the Keiser bike, they have the adjustment wheel at the back. Adjust it, lift it up until it reaches the bottom of the hand with the hand at hip bone height, and that is where the saddle will be. This is the same on all indoor cycle bikes, because it's the distance between the saddle and the center of the crank shaft, which is where your pedals are attached by the crank arms. That is the distance that's really, really important for getting the correct saddle height. A lot of people don't realize why this is important. It's important mainly for the way that your muscles work in the pedal rotation. It's the amount of contraction and the amount of extension on all of the muscle groups as you rotate the pedals. If it's too low, you get far too much contraction of the posterior chain and far too much extension on the anterior chain of muscles. So by lifting the saddle up, you balance between the anterior and posterior chain, which gives you a much better balance in the knee. So the height of the saddle is really, really important. Then the bit that most people get wrong, or a lot of people get wrong, and I still see it now, the handlebars are set at exactly the same height as the saddle. So the saddle becomes your metric data point for the whole bike setup. So effectively set your saddle height first, set the bar height the same as the saddle, and then you've got the correct height difference between those two areas of the bike where your hands and also your backside sits. The reason we need this correct, and we do have this way, is because there's a very important area of the body that we need to engage when riding a bike, and that is the core. If you don't have the handlebars at the same height as the saddle, you don't achieve that 40-degree angle on the lower back, which engages the core underneath it. If the bars are too high, you sit more upright, the core relaxes, which puts all the strain on the lower back. Most people who I've approached who said, I don't do indoor cycling because I got a bad back or it hurts my back, I then tell them to set the bike up for me, and you tend to find they've got the bars up here and the saddle down here. And as soon as you put it down there, when they first start to ride it, they have a slight moan because it's slightly less comfortable when they ride. But after a couple of weeks, they always come back and say, I don't have any more problems with my lower back. So generally that's where that goes. The Keiser bike is actually a brilliant frame because the actual angle of the frame on the Keiser bike is set the same as a road bike. So what happens is, no matter what height you put the seat, if you're someone who is as tall as Mel is, and he sets his saddle really, really high, and he sets the bars at the same height, you always create the correct distance between the bar and the saddle to create that 40-degree angle. If you have, for example, on a Keiser bike, the bar's too high, not only do the bars raise up, but they raise out as well. So you end up reaching for the bars, which is not a great way to ride the bike at all. So from that point of view, those are really the basics for setting up the bike. The micro adjustments, especially on the M3i, the handlebars, set them in position 5, middle of the bar for everybody. Literally to start with, the front edge of the slider, middle of the bar, position 5, fix it in position. And then undo the saddle when you're seated on the saddle with your hands in the basic riding position. And what you need to do is place your feet at what we call the 3 and 9 flat position to the floor. So the front pedal and the back pedal are the same distance from the floor. So they're perfectly level. And what we need to do in that position is just take a look over your forward knee, and your kneecap should be directly above the middle of the pedal. If your saddle is too far forward, your knee will be over the toes. If the saddle is too far back, your knee will be over your laces. Once you've got the saddle in the correct position, so the knee falls directly over the toes with the feet flat in that position, tighten the saddle up, and that's it, you're away to go. The Keiser bike makes this a little bit easier than some of the other bikes, but generally the setup is the same on all indoor cycle bikes. Seat height, bar height, fix the bars in position. A lot of spin bikes, you can't move the bar anywhere, but fix the bars in a mid-place position and then adjust your saddle. And then if you need to actually adjust the bars, for example, if you've got particularly long arms, short arms, or you can move the bars to suit, but as long as the rest of the bike is all set up in correct position. So generally that's how you set the Keiser bike up. And any
No, I mean that was really informative, and I've seen that too. Whether it was in classes, sometimes at the gym, people doing different heights. Is it? I mean, I appreciate what you said though too. Like someone who says maybe they have a sore back, but they like having their bars up. So yeah, basically, you're saying you would still recommend no, put them at the same height. You will find over time you're going to be more comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But it
What you
engages.
find, what you find from a fitness point of view, it's probably just my interjection here. It's very similar to people who say, I don't do sit-ups because I get back pain. And what you find is because you've got an imbalance of strength between in the core, so the front and the back of the actual core. When you actually get people starting to do ab exercise and that core starts to strengthen up, all of a sudden the back pain goes. And what you'll find is because this thing, if you imagine an old style Victorian girdle where the woman stood behind dressing the rich person, and they were pulling this corset nice and tight, and they were doing this. Well, that's exactly what the core does. You strengthen this core, and it's in particular with people that get older. So because if you look at people from even 15, 20 years ago, because fitness has become this, it's for everybody now. Certainly people of my parents' age didn't used to do fitness. They went to work, they retired, and that was it, and they got old. Now you're getting 60, 70, 80-year-olds that are super fit for their age. And that is because fitness is for everybody, and people have realized fitness is for everyone. And one of the big things that they are now realizing in old people's homes and even older people in general is if you keep this core nice and strong, it promotes health everywhere. And that's what you find when I certainly have people who say, I don't do sit-ups because I get lower back pain. You start improving the strength in their core, the back pain's gone. And that's two things. One, because this core's got stronger, and two, because you've increased from other exercise and activities the flexibility in the glutes and the hamstrings. And that's where a lot of back pain comes from, either tight hamstrings and glutes, and I call it the backside, so everything from calves all the way upwards, or from a very weak core. You strengthen that core up, and especially when you're riding a bike, you get in the right position on an indoor cycle, you strengthen that core up, keep it tight, you find that the back pain goes, and it's exactly what Darren's saying.
Yeah, and this is why bike setup is so important, because what Mel's saying there is that in any form of fitness or any form at all for the human body, balance between muscle groups is super important. And you need to balance the strain taken on the body when riding a bike between the core and the lower back. Now, by putting the bar too high, you're putting it all on the lower back. Now, that's not helping you gain a stronger core, but it's also going to make the lower back suffer because it's taking all of that upper body weight and the movement. And one area that people don't realize, especially when they start working with power, and therefore they start to actually push their body to, the limits that they want to ride to. They're riding, to create a better person, a better cyclist, a better, stronger, more powerful person, is the amount of power that comes from the core, through the hip flexor, actually down into the quads, that whole chain of muscle groups. Now, if you're not engaging the core, then that power won't start in the core. It'll start at the hip flexors. It'll just be directly into the quads. So it's a real great area that cycling helps enormously. Long periods of time, 40, 45 minutes, an hour on a bike in the correct position can really create quite a lot of tension in that core area without anybody actually realizing they're doing kind of core
exercises.
Yeah.
That